Everybody, do I have your attention? Has Fourth Amendment rights against illegal searches and seizure, regardless of their immigration status or their citizenship status or how they got to this country or whether they're here temporarily on a tourist visa or illegally or a citizen that was born here or naturalized. We all have Fourth Amendment privileges. We all have Fifth Amendment privileges under the U.S. Constitution, the right to counsel if we've been arrested or detained. Why does this matter? Well, it matters in general, but it certainly matters to Judge Frimpong in L.A., who just entered the latest temporary restraining order against the Trump administration to stop them from using racial and immigration profiling to stop, frisk, and arrest people and put them in the back of, white vans wearing masks. They're putting children and others in vans without regard to the Fourth Amendment or the Fifth Amendment, denying them the right even to counsel. And Judge Frimpong, in 2 new orders, has decided to put a stop to it. We break it all down to you and explain why this kind of case and those kind of rulings are so important at this critical moment. Only on Legal AF, the podcast. Take a listen.
Popok, all hell was breaking loose in California over the past few days, frankly, for a while, as ICE, dressed in their military gear, bringing their tanks, invading our neighborhoods. They started off earlier in the week going through MacArthur Park and kind of storming a park where kids were playing soccer in Los Angeles County. And then ICE began its raids of farms in Santa Barbara County, in Ventura County, all throughout Fresno County, Riverside, and causing a lot of chaos, rounding people up if they looked Hispanic, whether they were American citizens or not, just rounding people up. I mean, we've heard stories about a disabled veteran who was at the Camarillo farmhouse plant, or glass house plant, that was used for cannabis farming, was a security guard there, and he was leaving. He was rounded up by ICE. We're talking about an American citizen.
There's an American citizen, Job Garcia, who just filed a multi-million-dollar lawsuit in L.A. with a video, it's up on Instagram, about him being pulled. He's an American citizen being pulled out of the cab of his truck by ICE, who racial profiled him. And because he looked a certain way and spoke a certain way and hung out in a certain place, they used that as probable cause or to violate his Fourth Amendment rights of search and seizure. And he's not taking it lying down. He's the first lawsuit that's been brought by an American citizen for the violation of his constitutional rights by this administration and their deportation and removal plan. Things are going to happen like this, right, Ben? When you have a 3,000 a day quota for arrests being pushed by Tom Homan and Stephen Miller, and you have an ICE group that's morale is so in the trash that part of the budget that just got passed was to give them a $10,000 bonus to stay because nobody wants to be there. They're calling it internally at ICE Mission Impossible. They hate their job. This is not what they signed up for. When you put that together in one place, being pushed by depraved people like Stephen Miller and Tom Homan, bad things happen. We're there to report on it so that people see. It's one, like I said earlier, it's one thing to read about it or to read an executive order of Donald Trump. It is another thing for the repulsiveness. And this is where the polling is Donald Trump is getting whipsawed between his immigration policies, which people are now seeing in the flesh as human beings are being chased and children are being chased on horseback and thrown in the back in vans chained together. With this Epstein story that it just is like a bad penny for Donald Trump. It just won't go away. The more he wills it to go away, the worse it is for him. And he's getting whipsawed between these two things while he Fs with the global economy with his tariff policies.
So let's talk about this order out of the Central District of California, an injunction against the Trump regime and ICE from racially profiling people. The ACLU put in so many alarming facts about what was taking place out here. And we know it's taking place. I mean, just if you look Hispanic, the ICE would roll up at the swap meets. They don't care if you're an American citizen or not. They or a migrant, they run up to you, they grab you, and they throw you in the car and they bring you away. And then they ask questions later. Maybe they release you, maybe they don't, maybe you end up wherever. I mean, there's still a lot of people who are missing. Where are these people? In LA, there are signs missing. Where is this person? Like in the United States. So Popok, talk about this district court order.
Yeah, we've got a great district court order out of your neck of the woods, Central District of California. So Judge Frimpong, who's a Biden appointee, she made it relatively simple. She said, this is not a difficult case. Regardless of whether you want to try to deport and remove migrants and undocumented, they have Fourth Amendment search and seizure rights, and they have Fifth Amendment rights to counsel if they've been detained, and you are violating both of them. In her 52-page opinion, she recites the facts that were put in by the ACLU about what's happening. And she said, you are enjoined from doing the following. You cannot base your stop and detain and arrest based on the accent that they have, the language that they speak, what they look like, what their last name is, where they work, where they are hanging out or hanging around. You can't do any racial or immigrant profiling in order to violate the Fourth Amendment. The Fourth Amendment is not, yes, it's for American citizens, but it's for everyone on American soil. And they are, because of this widespread search and seizure that they're using, they're not being careful at all about how they filter out the good from the bad. In fact, you have spokespeople for the Trump administration that says another district judge is undermining the will of the American people. Thanks, Tricia McLaughlin. Why don't you look at your polling? The will of the American people is that 68% think your immigration plans are terrible and depraved, and they believe there should be a path to citizenship, and they don't believe in removal. They also love they love pushing these buttons, knowing that they are false. The button of, we're getting rapists, murderers, pedophiles off the street, meaning if we talk about this and criticize their violation of the Fourth Amendment, we must be pro-murder, pro-rape, and pro-pedophilia. And the reality is, that's not what the numbers show. More than 50% of the people that are being picked up and stopped and arrested don't have a criminal record at all. And they are not getting MS-13 off the street. So that is a complete and total fabrication of the Trump administration. And they say that outside the courtroom. But why they lose is because they have no evidence of that in the courtroom. And so they lose time and time again at every federal judge, at every trial judge level and appellate court level. We'll set aside for a moment for now what happens at the Supreme Court issue. So Frimpong took a look at all the facts, and she's issued. It's not a nationwide injunction. We've done a great tutorial about why it's not a nationwide injunction. It applies to Central District of California, but it will have, as the ACLU has said in their press releases, it will have a ripple effect, a domino effect, as a blueprint for how other judges will address this very issue. Eventually, we're going to talk about a class certification today. There's going to be a class certification of everybody who's being racially or otherwise profiled in the violation of the Fourth Amendment and not given access to counsel in violation of the Fifth Amendment. She actually issued 2 temporary restraining orders. Some of the reporting was like it was 1. It's 2. It's one on the Fourth Amendment and the other on the Fifth Amendment. At the very same time she's doing that, that guy, Job Garcia, filed his multi-million-dollar lawsuit because he is an American citizen who was racially profiled and pulled out of the cab of his truck and roughed up by ICE, backed up by National Guard. It's another reason you don't want to have the federalization of the National Guard, because all you're seeing then is the military involved with the violation of Americans and others' Fourth Amendment rights, which is exactly where an apolitical military does not want to be.
You know, one of the things you talked about, this, injunction as it relates to Southern California, it's limited this order by Judge Frimpong to Central District of California in this area. Injunctions like this will be granted. The broader issue, Popok, as you mentioned, these civil lawsuits that civil rights lawyers, that people like you would ultimately file, what's going to become a major issue is going to be the issue of Bivvens, right? This case that was decided in 1971, Bivvens versus 6 unnamed agents. And this case found, in that specific case, there was an implied cause of action for an individual whose Fourth Amendment protections against unreasonable search and seizures had been violated by the Federal Bureau of Narcotics. But over the years, as this implied cause of action has been tried to be extended to ICE and other groups, the Supreme Court has largely found that because Congress has not passed a law that specifically says you can sue ICE for unreasonable search and seizures, that you can't bring civil lawsuits against ICE. People may remember some of the early days of Legal AF. You and I covered the Bivvens case. And in one of the contexts where we covered it was actually a lawsuit brought by Michael Cohen against the Department of Justice and others when he showed up for a probation hearing and they wanted him to sign away his rights to do a book. And he goes, I'm not signing it. They put him in solitary confinement and he sues and says, you violated, that was an unreasonable search and seizure. You violated my constitutional rights. And the Supreme Court wouldn't take the case. And ultimately, the Second Circuit, following Supreme Court precedent, said Bivvens had not been extended to these other areas. So I flag that now because, Popok, I think that's where I think we're going to have an issue where these cases potentially get dismissed against ICE under Bivvens for the horrific conduct that they do. And then we're going to have to then see what's going to happen with the Bivvens doctrine. But unlike Trump, who has the Supreme Court on speed dial, I think a lot of these lawsuits against ICE, unfortunately, are going to take many years after, I think, unfortunately, they may get dismissed until it gets brought to the Supreme Court. And I actually think the Supreme Court, I'm not trying to give bad news here. I think the Supreme Court's going to kind of let ICE do whatever it wants. You disagree with me, Popok, on the Bivvens analysis there?
No, I don't. And the reason I raised Job is not because I think he'll ultimately be successful, although I looked at the complaint briefly before I was doing a hot take. They have a they may have a workaround for it. But Bivvens, this MAGA Supreme Court, if Bivvens isn't on life support, it's pretty close. They just don't like when Congress hasn't spoken expressly on an issue. They just don't like defined liability, especially when it undermines their imperial presidency model, which we're watching over and over and over again. I mean, I was even surprised that they found, back to Ron DeSantis for a minute. Ron DeSantis and his attorney general, the guy that came up with the Alcatraz, alligator Alcatraz, had a setback because the Supreme Court, even they thought that Ron DeSantis is out there to try to criminalize immigration by state law in Florida. And they were like, yeah, no, you can't do that. So I was like, well, we found the limits of what the Supreme Court is willing to back you up on when you have depraved immigration policies. But I agree with you. I think, but the purpose of talking about it, this is where you and I think, do a good job in the way we present to our audience, is not the defeatist, he did it, but he's going to lose. We're not the Grim Reaper. There is merit and there is purpose. And there is a learning that happens and a need to file these things, even if we can astral project into what's going to happen 2 or 3 years from now. We need to bring the thousands of lawsuits. I said 4,000. I think I'm going to be right by the end of the term, against the Trump administration, and let the trial court level judges, even if they're not going to be ultimately supported on every issue by the United States Supreme Court, do their jobs. Most justice is done at the trial level and at the appellate court level, and not at the United States Supreme Court level. There are tens of thousands of cases that are filed every year. Only 70 make it on to the big docket for the Supreme Court. They have other emergency applications and things that bulk up those numbers, but that's where justice is done. And we have to continue to just keep firing at the strike zone with these cases, whether it's done by private parties, by the states, by the public interest groups, by the new public interest groups that we never even heard of, 10 years ago or a year ago, that have popped up now to defend people who are being retaliated against by this vindictive president. It's just mind-boggling to me that we talk about the immolation of the Republican Party and the MAGA Party, which is one and the same at this point at the top of the top of the podcast. It's still remarkable to me, having always had for my adult life a other party that I could reasonably disagree with on most policy issues, but I could still consider a party on the other side. And now to see the numbers of the people who in the MAGA and Republican movement who think Trump is doing a good job, and the numbers there. Now, fortunately, the rest of America, including all of the independents at this point, have totally abandoned him and have left the building, which is why his numbers are terrible. But to see that the Republicans, and even like the country club Republicans and the ones that were the Goldwater, Reagan Republicans, are still somehow supporting him is mind-boggling to me. They've so overplayed their hand in shoving this agenda down our throats and up our other body parts over the last 6 months that I can't believe they're going to be shocked when the American people send them packing, at least the House and likely the Senate, at the midterms. I think their goal is to do maximum damage and destruction with a short time horizon that Trump has for many reasons, and to check the box of as many debts as he has to pay off to all the groups that got him elected. And then after that, it's up for us, for you and I and the rest of America, to pick up the pieces. Welcome back. We sit at the intersection of law and politics and now defense of democracy, so you don't have to. We invented that podcast about 5 years ago, Ben Meiselas and me, and we have on Saturdays our main show. It's at 8 p.m. Eastern time on YouTube for Midas, on an audio podcast platforms, wherever you can find. You just plug in Legal AF and you'll find it. On Wednesday, I do the show with Karen Friedman Agnifilo. We drill down. If you like that kind of clip, you're going to love the full-length show. It's 1 hour long. It's a podcast. It needs your help. It needs your love. Ratings and rankings matter. And so give it the love and oxygen that it needs, and hopefully you think it deserves, by downloading the audio versions on audio podcast platforms, watching the YouTube version, sending it off to friends and family and people in your life, asking them to do the same. Leave a 5-star review and comments. And then we have a YouTube channel that's devoted to all things Legal AF, called Legal AF MTN. Come over there. No paywall, no outside investors. Hit the free subscribe button and you're there. You'll get the reminders every time. And we post new videos 10, 12 times a day. So until my next report, this is Michael Popok. Can't get your fill of Legal AF? Me neither. That's why we formed the Legal AF Substack. Every time we mention something in a hot take, whether it's a court filing or a oral argument, come over to the Substack. You'll find the court filing and the oral argument there, including a daily roundup that I do called, wait for it, Morning AF. What else? All the other contributors from Legal AF are there as well. We got some new reporting. We got interviews. We got ad-free versions of the podcast and hot takes. Where? Legal AF on Substack. Come over now to free subscribe.